Hi, Professor Gerald Friedman, Department of Economics, University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And we're here today to talk about whether the economists have learned anything. We've had the worst economic crisis in 80 years. Have they learned anything from it? Not to give away the punchline, but the short answer is no. But let's go through it a little bit. It seemed for a while after the economic crisis hit that they were learning things. There was a great moment where Alan Greenspan, the Maestro, that's the title of a biography of him, Maestro. He plays the sax in a jazz band, or the trumpet. I forget what instrument. Anyway, clarinet. He plays clarinet. Greenspan testified before Congress in October 2008 and said how surprised he was and how he needed to rethink his ideas because it seems like he was wrong. Later, he said that he was right 70% of the time. That would get you a C, maybe a D in a class of mine. But anyway, Greenspan acknowledged that he misunderstood the way financial markets worked. There are other economists, like James Galbraiths from Texas and Dean Baker at the Center for Economic Policy, who didn't have anything to apologize for, actually, except for being an economist. Galbraith testified before the Senate, apologized on behalf of the economic profession for how many mistakes the economists had made. It was kind of unfortunate for him to be apologizing because he was right all along. Same for Dean Baker. But for a while, it seemed that a great many orthodox conservative economists were acknowledging mistakes. Martin Feldstein, former advisor to the Bushes, to Ronald Reagan, one of the leading conservative economists in the United States, came out with an op-ed in the Washington Post and the New York Times calling for a major stimulus. He objected to aspects of the Obama stimulus. For example, he thought the tax cuts were way too large. Hey, most Democrats agreed. They put in the big tax cuts into the stimulus to try to accommodate Republicans. But Feldstein said we need to be spending more money. We need to stimulate the economy through fiscal policy. Quite a concession. There were others. Richard Posner at Chicago, one of the country's leading conservative economists, wrote about the revival of Keynes, the return of Keynes. That was very promising, 2009. Pretty quickly, though, things turned around. The economy got a little better. Certainly the crisis, where it seemed like from day to day the whole world might explode, that went away. And the economists, the conservative economists, came back and started saying the same old stuff. Now, a lot of it from people like John Taylor at Stanford and Ed Prescott at Chicago just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're kind of trying to find some way to argue that stimulus spending didn't work. They invoked Ricardian equivalence, a notion that Ricardo raised in a letter and an encyclopedia entry, but didn't really believe. This is a great idea. Here it is. It should really be called Barrow-Ricardian because Robert Barrow's really the person who invented it, not David Ricardo. The idea is that if the government runs a deficit, you will immediately think, oh my God, they're going to be raising taxes in the future to pay off that deficit. Therefore, I need to save money today in anticipation of higher taxes in the future. People, that's the idea here, people will reduce their consumption spending dollar for every increase in government deficit. Therefore, running a deficit won't do anything. It will be completely negated by reductions in consumer spending. Can you believe that serious people actually say this with a straight face? The first time I heard this, I was in graduate school. I thought it was a joke. I thought, it's like, you got to be kidding. People don't act that way. I mean, running a deficit. Oh my God, maybe someday in the future they'll do something to balance the deficit. Maybe taxes will be a little bit higher. Somebody else's problem. I'm not going to worry about that. I mean, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. Maybe I'll be alive, maybe I won't. Even if it does happen, it's far in the future. I discount that. I mean, hey, people discount all sorts of possibilities in the future. Look at how Republicans and conservatives go around saying we don't need to worry about global warming because, after all, that's in the future. We don't worry about the future. Ricardian equivalence assumes perfect foresight, perfect knowledge, zero interest rates. It's absurd. Nobody acts that way. But conservative economists have started saying that again. Okay. There's a more serious argument that I want to bring up, which has a lot more traction. This goes back to a former chief economist at the International Monetary Fund, a very bright guy, Raghuram Rajan, now teaching at University of Chicago. Rajan is one of those people who got it right. And he has a book, Fault Lines, How Hidden Fractures Still Threaten the World Economy. A brilliant book. Brilliant as rhetoric as well as economics. As rhetoric, he begins the book in the introduction or the preface talking about how before the crisis hit, he gave a talk at an International Monetary Fund sponsored event warning of the dangers in the financial markets coming from these mortgages and rising and the bubble in the housing market in the United States. And he talks about how he was booed off the stage and these people dismissed him. So right away he establishes credibility. Great rhetoric. He then tells a story that has a lot of sense in it until you get to the punchline, where it becomes, wrong. The story begins with rising inequality in the United States. Rajan is an orthodox economist. He doesn't attribute rising inequality to government tax and spending programs, to the decline in the real value of the minimum wage, to deregulation, to neoliberalism. No, he attributes it to the failure of American education to maintain the supply of skilled labor to compete in a technologically dynamic world. So inequality is because of technological progress and the failure of American education to train more people. This is a very conservative, orthodox idea because basically the way they take it, they blame it all on school teachers. But okay, Rajan doesn't actually talk very much about that. He just attributes this to technological change causing rising inequality. Governments, he says, try to respond in a nice way to rising inequality. It's starting to get a little strange. So he says Clinton and even more the Bush administration tried to balance rising inequality by promoting wealth accumulation among poor Americans by making it easier for them to own homes. So they were promoting home ownership. How were they doing it? By encouraging the Federal Reserve to provide liquidity to financial markets, and by encouraging Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, these two government-sponsored enterprises that securitize mortgages traditionally. Fannie Mae goes back to the 30s, Freddie Mac to the 60s. They're government-sponsored but privately owned companies that buy mortgages on the secondary market, allowing banks to write mortgages and then sell them. The whole securitization process that we talked about earlier with the housing bubble. Rajan thus blames the financial crisis on the housing bubble. He blames the housing bubble on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He blames them on government policies to address inequality, which is due to technology and therefore can't be addressed. What caused the problem? Government. Rajan manages to turn this private crisis into something caused by government. Wow, what a rhetoric. What a wonderful argument. It's completely wrong. I mean, he's right about rising inequality. Whether it's due to technology is quite debatable, and I think he's wrong there. But even more, he's wrong about Fannie and Freddie. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were very late to this whole process. And they didn't get involved because they wanted to reduce inequality. They got involved because they wanted to make money, and they saw everybody else was making money. Under their rules, they could not buy the Alt-A, the low quality, the subprime mortgages, the liar's loans. They couldn't buy those. So Fannie and Freddie in 2004, 2005 were losing out on the mortgage market. Citigroup, Bank America, Wells Fargo. These companies were making lots and lots of money. Lehman Brothers was making lots and lots of money on these mortgages, these toxic assets. Fannie and Freddie weren't. Their share of the mortgage market was plummeting. So yes, they changed their rules. And in 2006, they came roaring back into the market, buying crappy mortgages, buying trash, buying toxic assets. Yeah, 2006, just in time. Fannie and Freddie got killed. And they went bankrupt, they were nationalized, because they got involved in the mortgage market at the end of the process. Why did they do it? They did it to make money. They did it because the compensation schemes at Fannie and Freddie rewarded risk-taking, just like at Bank America, just like at Citigroup. Fannie and Freddie were kept out of the process for a long time because of sensible regulations. They gave up on those regulations, they relaxed the rules, but it wasn't to help the American middle class. It was to make money for rich people, at the top of the corporate hierarchy in Fannie and Freddie, just like at Citigroup, etc. Rajan's story has the wrong villains. Yeah, Fannie and Freddie were villainous at the end. No, the villains are the people at Countrywide, at Citigroup, throughout Wall Street, the people who were making money by buying and selling toxic assets, walking away with millions and millions in bonuses. Those are the villains. And they did it because they could. Yeah. They didn't cause the economic downturn, but they caused the financial crisis. And they caused huge suffering for homeowners and for people throughout the United States. The larger picture, though, the economic crisis, is due to the larger system of neoliberalism that was set in place in the 1970s and 1980s, and that brought about a huge redistribution of income from the 99% to the 1%. And we're going to talk about that next time. So have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.